Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, my dear brothers and sisters in Riyadh's IQRA TV. Before we went on to the break, I've been talking to my dear friend Yusuf Dar from the Community Safety Forum, who's come here from Manchester, to talk about a number of issues that we as a Muslim community need to be aware of and need to be actually prepared for, and start looking at more seriously than we have done in the past, around all sorts of issues around children safeguarding, around the new issues around SRE, sexual sort of relationship education, around mosque safety. We've seen the Christchurch attack. We've seen after the Christchurch attack sort of a number of mosques attacked in this country, particularly in Birmingham. But I'm not going to talk too much about that, because I think that is sub judice to a certain extent, because what is actually emerging is something completely different to what we thought right at the beginning. So I want to talk to Yusuf about a seminar that he ran, his group ran in Manchester for the Muslim community, around governance of mosque and Islamic institutions. Yusuf, why do you felt necessary to do that in terms of running a seminar around? I mean, governance is a very important issue. There's no doubt about it. And as you said, this is something that we need to be constantly mindful of. What was the driver that you felt that you needed to do this now?
Well, firstly, it was done in partnership. If you remember what I said about the CSF, we've kind of facilitated and looked at areas where we can plug the gap for the Muslim community. For example, where there are opportunities and where there are dangers to the community, and then speaking to the mosques and our partners. And when we looked at governance, there was clearly a big gap in terms of awareness about governance, and two, in terms of how does that impact mosques? They weren't sure. And in the present climate, governance has become a huge issue. Why? Because the Charity Commission has grown from what it was. It's far more intrusive, not just to Muslims, but to other organisations to be charity compliant.
So they've got more powers.
They've got more powers.
Right.
So, for example, when you look at the website, they intervene in a lot of charities, not just Muslims. So they intervene in Christian charities, Jewish charities, Hindu charities, Sikh charities, on that basis. And the power they've got is this, that if there isn't sufficient governance, and when the organisation's been given time to redeem that or correct that, they've got the powers to actually take the trustees out of the board, disqualify them completely, where they would never be able to hold a position in the UK at that level. Two, bring in their own trustees or a CEO to run that charity in the interim till it's back up to speed.
This is presupposing that all the mosques, do they have to register as a charity?
Well, they don't have to, but there's quite a lot of mosques and organisations that
I know most of them are. All the good ones are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, all the good ones are.
But even if they weren't part of that process, it's also right to have good governance anyway.
Yes.
Because good governance leads to better delivery of whatever you want to do. So,
have you come across Muslim institutions, because of your Muslim channel, where they're actually not registered with the registered charity, with the Charity Commission, or not formally structured in a way where they're probably institutions of as a community interest companies? Are they still around? Are they very rare?
There are. Yeah, I won't name them. Not only that.
No, please don't.
Yeah,
name them.
it's also. I mean, I was quite surprised. There are even some which don't have, apart from registering, that some don't even have things like insurance policies in place. So never mind the governance. So there are some organisation individuals, for whatever reason, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong in what they do, for their own purpose, they don't feel it fit to be a charity or even have simple things as an insurance policy in case of fire and theft. These are simple kind of things that you need to have as an organisation.
Right. I mean, that might be something to do with theology and things like that in some cases.
Might be.
But in terms of governance, and when we talk about governance, what we mean is, how is the institution run? Has it got proper mechanisms in place? Has it got proper policies in place? Has it got issues around how the decisions are made? Who's got control of the money? And how it's spent, and who is it spent to, for, and things like that. Those are some of the very sort of brief issues.
Yeah, the brief issue is sometimes governance is very misunderstood and confused with management, and the two cross over. So governance is basically to govern. So you govern an organisation. By that it means is, what are we doing? What are we doing? And I've used this example. If you were in a ship, and you said you wanted to go from here to South Africa, you then put the structures in place on how you think we can go to South Africa. The driving is the manager, is the management off. So you turn around to the captain of the ship or the company and say, look, we want to go to South Africa to do this, to deliver some charity work. This is how much we want to deliver. This is where we want it delivered. Over to you. The management is how you actually take that ship from here to South Africa and deliver
but what would
it
you
where
say?
it wants.
What would you say to people who've been running mosques and madrasas for years,
Yeah.
without having all these rules being imposed upon them, and
Yeah.
they've been doing very well? Why would they need to change? I mean, they've been doing it for years.
Yeah.
Right? Why do they need to go through this seminar? I mean, people have been running mosques and madrasas for 30, 40, 50 years now.
Yeah.
So what is it that you feel? I mean, I know you said the Charity Commission has got, they've got more powers, etc. Why do you think that you need to? What if I was the chair of the mosque and I've been running it for a number of years? I'd say we've been running a successful mosque. We have committee, we have people in place, chair, deputy chair, treasurer, etc. Why do I need to come to the governance seminar?
Well, if you're a charity, I think you've got to anyway. It's legally required of you. If you're not, good practice.
I have to come to your seminar because
no.
Right.
If you're a registered charity, then you need to show the Charities Commission that you have got governance processes and policies in place, and you are fit for purpose, because that's what the Charities Commission will say. So you're doing what's expected of a charity. Yeah, you've got policies, you've got structures.
So what sort of policies would they need?
Well, simple things like a safeguarding policy, a policy on how, a constitution, on how you pick your trustees. Are they fit for purpose? Are there any conflicts of interest? That's hugely critical for an organisation, because if you haven't got that right at the top tier, then how do you expect the organisation to work properly?
Right.
So those are kind of things the Charities Commission would be looking at. Is this organisation structures? Has it got objectives?
Does every organisation who are registered will they have to have a constitution?
Well, absolutely. There's a requirement from the Charities Commission, because not only that, it needs to be transparent.
Right.
There are other kind of things in place. Equalities. How do you deliver equalities?
Right.
You're duty bound to deliver the Equalities Act. How are we coping with that? Safeguarding. Specifically if they're mosques and is to do with children coming to the mosque or going to the madrasas, have we got a safeguarding policy in place?
Right.
How is that policy delivered?
So if from my experience, if you look at the way mosques are governed at this moment in time, the majority of mosques that I know of, both particularly in the Asian subcontinent community, are governed by men.
Yes.
They're the members of the committee. So how does this equality legislation impact on that?
Well, at some stage the Charities Commission, if they do come in, will look at that and comment. Whilst it's only for the public bodies to deliver the Equalities Act, if you're a private company, but good practice also says the Charities Commission can come and make comment on it and see that as a weakness. Specifically, I'll give you a simple example. So if you're running a mosque and you've got a board of trustees and you're going through a selection process, and there's two females, for example, gender, two ladies who apply, and they're far better qualified than the person you've selected. Well, you've got a huge issue then. And if that was reported to the Charities Commission, they'd have to look at that and comment on that.
But just go back a little bit. Because they're not a public body, what can the Charity Commission do?
Well, the Charity Commission, for me, could intervene, and they could argue that the process they've got in place in terms of governance is not equality compliant. Whether they could prosecute them, I don't know. We'd have to look at a stated case on that. I don't know if there has been one. But even if you're not a part of the Charities Commission, the 21st century requires Muslim organisations to be compliant with that, because those are very Islamic as well, Brother Banner. What the Charities Commission is asking us to do is very Islamic. Is to be open, is to have your accounts done, is to have things written down. What you're going to do, how you're going to do it, who's in charge. These are very Islamic qualities.
Oh, definitely, yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
So the contract, the Prophet was very keen on having proper contracts.
Spot on. And having witnesses and everything being structured. So even if you're not a charity, my advice to any organisation would be look hard at yourself and look at where you can improve yourself, because the scope for improvement.
So what are the threats at this moment in time? We've got hundreds of, the last figure somebody mentioned was we've got 2,000 mosques in this
Yes.
country, probably even more than that. But there are
Probably.
2,000 mosques
Yeah.
in this country. And I'm sure, you know, to a
Yeah.
varying degree, some will have the constitution,
Yeah.
some will have a management committee. What are the threats, are there any emerging threats for these institutions from your experience that they need to be aware of?
I think the governance thing for me is a huge one,
Right,
because a lot of mosques and Muslim organisations are charities.
right.
And I think the Charities Commission, well, at one stage, the Charities Commission had a very high number of Muslim organisations that it was looking at. I think it
Right.
might even have been 60%. Now, that's not just because he was focusing on Muslim organisations. As you rightly said, Muslim organisations, for example, if you look at other faiths, there are a lot of mosques and Muslim organisations in the UK. There are over 200 in Manchester, mosques. So there's a huge amount there for us. And therefore, we need to make sure we're up to the 21st century, the challenges of the 21st century, I think. And that's a huge threat. The other threats would be things like the far-right extremism.
Right.
Yeah, for me. And again, I've been talking that up. We could go back to me going to speak to policing ministers who didn't want to listen to me. And the nice thing is, finally, Neil Basu, who's the head of counter-terrorism, last year said what I said 20 years ago, was that the far right is a huge threat. The far right is a terrorist organisation, and the far right is organised. And the policing minister at the time, I won't name them, wouldn't accept that. So Neil Basu finally accepting that 20 years on is a very big plus for us, because that threat to me is huge.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, and that's something that people like myself and others who sat on the government's advisory body have been saying as well for some time. If you look at the first tackling extremism and terrorism document that came out from that, which was commissioned by Mr. Cameron, David Cameron at that time, had very little, if any, mention of the far right, and we made our concerns known at that time. We were ignored. But coming back to this issue, you talk.
Can I just go back?
Yeah, go on.
I missed a point. I've just realised. I do apologise to the viewers. Is you asked about the threats. The other threats were pretty much those three that we talked. Key threats: safeguarding. Safeguarding again, because there have been some really bad examples, and I'm not saying we as a community are bad, because we as a community are wonderful.
Every community, we have the good and the bad.
We have some fantastic
the majority
examples.
The majority are good. There's
Thank
a few bad people who will give us the bad name. Yes.
It's because I'm a United fan, I liken it to this.
Right.
United get 77,000 every week,
Right.
unlike some of the football clubs. So if you take 10% of those are going to have a bad element to them. We are the second biggest faith group. We total some 4 million. We've got a huge number of organisations, huge number of madrasas. Some of those, and I've got to be honest, some of those are not up to the 21st century, even for me.
Right.
And we need to look at those, because it's not fair on the organisation, the community, or the children who go there.
Yeah, the
absolutely.
Children, yes.
And if my child was going there, or your child was going there, and some of the cases we've seen in the papers,
I totally agree.
I would not be happy for my child to go there. So we've got to be honest about it.
Well, I think
again,
we've done a program many months ago around these issues around safeguarding, and we need to make sure that we are better than the law requires us to be, and that is also Islamic.
Absolutely.
But I mean, coming back, you say the safeguarding issues, and I think a lot of mosques are now recognizing that safeguarding is an issue that they need to contend with, and they're quite advanced in doing some of that. But you mentioned the far right, and we've seen what's happened in Christchurch.
Yeah.
And there's been a fear immediately after Christchurch that something would happen in here, and something did happen in unfortunately. Now that Ramadan is coming, just around the corner, there's a lot of fear about how mosques will protect themselves. The government, as I said before we went for the break, has set up this initiative for faith communities, 1.6 million, as you say. Can you just explain what that initiative is all about, and what is it there for? What's the money there for?
Well, the government has increased that from the 800,000 previously to 1.6. That's there for religious and faith organisations to look at how they can utilise that to improve the security and safety at places of worship. Backing that up is a figure of 5 million to help with the training. And the training aspect is to train organisations to better understand and deal with issues around safeguarding those premises. So we've got that in place. It's not gone live yet, but certainly in Manchester, what we're doing is doing a bit of a scoping exercise with all the Council of Mosques to look at where we are with which mosque, where are the gaps, which are the danger areas. So when that funding source is open, inshallah, what we'll do is the mosque can then look at applying for those vulnerable mosques. So, and I would ask every Muslim organisation to seriously look at that, although it's not a lot of money. I think one point we need to make sure
they give 50% towards the cost of whatever you need to do.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Brother Banner. I think again that hasn't all come out yet. They haven't given all the kind of, how can I put it, the nuts and bolts of it. I know the Home Secretary wrote an open letter and said he's put that forward. As to how and what we can get, it's unclear. But I am told, as you are, we're having this discussion, that it won't be as complicated as the last time, because that was one of the key issues why people didn't. It was very kind of, how can I put it?
Quite bureaucratic.
Very bureaucratic. And organisations like mosques, as I call it, the two-star mosques, who, bless them, do a tremendous amount of work, they haven't got the expertise or the time to fill a 20, 30-page Home Office document.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I know, and I think the first round and the second round provided up to 50% of the cost of putting CCTVs and any security thing. But you need to talk to your local police crime reduction officer, get him or her involved.
Or local authority as well.
Yeah.
The local authority will have.
Is it local authority as well?
I think the local authority will have. I mean, that funding is coming from a source called Making Britain Safer.
Right.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of exactly what it's called. It's Making Britain
I
Safer.
can't remember the name.
It's local authority. So if you approach your local authority, they will have a lead on that.
Right.
I think it's BSBT. It's called. They will be able to better tell you. Or also go onto the Home Office website and have a look when it goes live, because at the moment it's not live yet.
Yeah, I had a conversation in the Home Office a few weeks ago. They're looking at the mechanics of it at the moment, and they asked for people's advice. What the mechanics need to be, because I've had 2 years of working around this issue in my membership of the advisory body. So we've advised them what they need to do. But as Yusuf says, there is this fund available. People were reluctant, in the initial stages to apply for this funding, because they were suspicious that if you take government money, then you're opening yourself to government scrutiny, and then they could come and ask you all sorts of questions, that were sometimes people felt were inappropriate or unnecessary. Is that something that you found in your work with the Community Safety Forum?
I think initially, when the previous kind of funding streams came through, that was of a huge concern, because that came at the piggyback of the prevent agenda.
Yes.
So Muslim communities had been hardened to prevent, and some of the issues, pitfalls, and they were very suspicious. I think now this funding has come from BSBT, from a different section of the Home Office. And again, I can't categorically say 100% it's not. I think there would be a better opportunity and less likelihood of any intrusive kind of how can I put it, requirements on behalf of the organisation.
The fear was, obviously, if you take government money, then you open yourself to scrutiny. As I said, people then can come and ask you all sorts of questions, and people were reluctant at that time. And as you say, people were also reluctant because there was that prevent element within that. I'm not sure which section of the Home Office the money is now coming from, but it's still coming from the same pot, so it's a government pot. But the issue is, I think we as a Muslim community, having seen what's happening in Christchurch, and we've had attacks. I mean, Altrincham Mosque was attacked, not so long ago. Then Altrincham, apparently, I've been told, has got a very, very good interfaith community relationship. Yet, despite that, he was attacked, and one of our brothers was actually stabbed. Over there last year, was it, or the year before?
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
After the Ariana Grande incident. So mosques are very vulnerable, and particularly if we look at the way mosques are structured. Those who go into the mosque, we're facing in the opposite direction of the doors, the entrances. So they are quite vulnerable. And I remember many, many, many years ago, over 30 years ago, when we had issues around the National Front. We were in the middle of Ramadan, it was summertime, and there was a threat about the National Front coming to Batley and attacking mosques. And I remember myself and a few others, throughout the month of Ramadan, we took one night off from praying Taraweeh to stand outside or sit outside and keep an eye out in case these people came and attacked us. Do you think there's that fear still in our community, or is that growing?
Yeah, I think firstly, let's put this into context. I think we don't want to scare people to death. I'm sorry about that terminology, but we are one of the safest places in the world. However, and this is the however, we cannot be complacent. It's the 21st century. We've seen what happened in New Zealand, and nobody would have predicted New Zealand. Even with my background, I would have never said New Zealand was a place where this could happen. And there are over 200 mosques been attacked in the UK since 2013. 3 have been bombed, not firebombed, actually bombed. So let's deal with the reality. Prevention is better than cure.
Definitely.
Let's accept the fact that there will be the odd individual, and the vast majority of the Brits are fine and the people are fine. But we live in a world where, unfortunately, if you look at what happened with the 3 mosques that got attacked, it was a person who came from the Ukraine to carry out that act. To Britain. The bombing and killed Brother Mohammed Salim, who was 85 years old. So we need to look at that basis. The world is a small place. We need to be a bit more diligent and vigilant about our mosques, which are vulnerable really when you have so many people. I think mosques are coming around to it. There is concern. And I think certainly from a GM perspective, post New Zealand, we had very good contact, as I said, with the strategic group, with our police service. And I would ask everybody to do the same. Go and speak to your chief constables. Do what we have done. Speak to them, outlay your fears and your requirements.
What, in your opinion, can the police do around it, particularly in the month of Ramadan? I mean, police resources are sort of dwindling. The police don't have the staffing power that they used to have. But, you know, what would you advise a chief constable, places like West Yorkshire, where we are a large Muslim community, like Greater Manchester, we've got hundreds of mosques and institutions. What do you think the police should be doing in order to allay the fears of the community, if there are any fears?
I think the first thing is going back to what I said. What we have in Manchester as a model is have a strategic group from the West Yorkshire Muslim community, people with grassroots linkage, who can come to the police, have an honest debate with them, and be absolutely honest about their concerns, about their fears, and see how they and the police can help each other. And for example, in Manchester, what they did post New Zealand was did a lot of reassurance work, where in the key areas, because we've got 200 mosques, they couldn't get to every one, but they tried to get to as many mosques as possible, and we made sure they did, because we checked that as a community, and they were true to their words. They went to the mosque, they were sat outside at Jummah prayers in the evenings, they were passing by patrols, people were calling in for coffee and have a chat. That goes a long way into reassuring the community.
Definitely, yes.
So that was one. The second point was Greater Manchester looked at the media, social media, where there were some horrendous things said on the media. Greater Manchester, I think, was the only force that was proactive in arresting people when they had gone beyond. And the problem with the media, as you'll know, Brother Bana, is that the test is very high in terms of arresting and prosecuting. But GMP went out and sent a message out to say we will not tolerate that kind of hate on media.
Okay. I mean, we're coming to the end of the program. I hope, I'm sure everybody found this very interesting, enlightening. But the message we need to pass to our members of the Muslim community is we are living, as the Chinese proverb goes, in interesting times. And some say it's a curse. We are following the Christchurch attack and attacks in the past and recently in the mosque in this country as well. We are now coming to the month of Ramadan, where we are all be focusing on Islam and our prayers and ibadats and things like that. But we also must not forget we need to be vigilant, as Brother Yusuf says. There is an opportunity coming up fairly soon. I'm not sure when. I remember the first round also opened up in Ramadan, and there was a very short window within which the applications had to be submitted. So this time around, we hope that it's going to be a much wider window. Every mosque and institution needs to review the security of their premises and surrounding areas. We employ stewards during the month of Ramadan now for a number of things, for car parking, etc., who keep an eye on everything. And so if we have the ability, please, 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 for your own safety, let's make sure you do that. Or make alternative arrangements. As Yusuf says, we don't want to scare people, but we have to live with the reality at this moment in time. This is funding is going to be available. Please make sure that you use it as much as possible. I hope you found this really interesting. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of the program. I've just been given the signal. I'm sorry, Yusuf wants to make, I know, a very important point, but we have to go. I hope you'll join me again next week. In the meantime, our programs are going to be changing because we're going to the Ramadan mode and appeal. If I don't get to see you next week, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May you have a wonderful, peaceful, relaxing, and really, really enlightening, spiritually uplifting Ramadan. And please, please, please make sure that you try, if you remember, to make dua for me and Brother Yusuf and all the other guests that I've had over the last few months. Have a wonderful, peaceful, as I say, spiritually uplifting Ramadan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May Allah be with you, and may He keep you safe and sound.